Hello, my name is Eris Carter, and I'm here to talk to you today about alternate history. Let's go straight into that, shall we? I'm doing it on Steve Jobs. Now, what if Steve Jobs, as we know him to be important in Apple, what if he wasn't involved in Apple? Let's say, what if he worked at McDonald's? I don't want to think about that either. What would happen if he did? Steve Jobs was the voice of Apple, and we're very sad to have him leave us in 2011. He worked on such things as the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, and also the acquisition of Pixar from Lucasfilm in 1986, which I found to be very interesting. Not a lot of people actually know Pixar to be its own, company, but it was actually owned by Apple at one point, and I'd like to touch upon that. Well, in an alternate detail, what if Jobs never involved himself with any of those? World financial meltdown. You might think it'd be, but it's not. But some things would be actually different, I think. And let's get into that. So, what if Steve Jobs never became involved in Apple and graduated high school and worked at McDonald's? Just had a regular job, never got involved with anything circuitry, just stayed an average Joe, never changed the world whatsoever. Well, for one thing, we know Pixar would have stayed at Lucasfilm, and even though it started as a hardware and software company, the irony being that it would still stay at Lucasfilm, it would have been acquired alongside Disney in 2012. So basically, my chance at seeing a science fiction Toy Story would have been a definite dream. It wouldn't have mattered that Pixar had to loan itself out to Disney on several occasions. Jobs would have nothing to do with that because he'd be out there flipping burgers. So, despite that, I think I still would have liked to see if Lucasfilm would have held on to Pixar a little bit longer. I think they would have done a lot more projects, a lot more worthy. But that's just me. The Microsoft Zune, and I actually had one, by the way. Um, if there were no iPods, we'd all listen to Zunes or whatever MP3 device was out available at the time that was widely popular. But a Zune was more of a fad, and in the early 2000s, it would have been the optimal MP3 player of choice. There'd be no iPod competition. There'd be nothing out to rout it from domineering. And it wouldn't have ended in 2011. Microsoft decided to finally pull the plug on its Zune. It couldn't compete with the iPod. It tried. It tried coming out with the Zune HD. It tried coming out with a bunch of different ways to keep it alive, including the Zune Marketplace on Xbox Live, as we all know. But if we didn't have Steve Jobs to innovate the iPod, yeah, I think we'd have a lot more Zunes in every house. But I think for a good thing, that didn't exactly happen the way it happened. And around the time of the first iPhone, which I didn't buy, I waited until the iPhone 4 to finally jump on board, by the way. During the time, we had a bunch of Blackberries and Blackjacks by Samsung, which were still widely popular. People actually revealed the first iPhone as a marvelous piece of technology when actually there was a lot it could do and a lot more of what the current iPhones of today they can do, which the first one cannot. But nonetheless, without Jobs for the first iPhone, Android and Windows phones, I'm more than certain would have flooded the marketplace, and BlackBerry would also not be a dying breed of phone. So we talked about three certain alternate histories and details involving if Steve Jobs had never worked at Apple, if he worked at McDonald's per se. And I'd like to say if he did work at McDonald's, maybe perhaps he would have made the best burgers, perhaps, or the best innovative things that Steve Jobs was responsible for. He would have applied them in different ways, especially in the fast food industry. So, in closing, Steve Jobs was a very cool dude. I would have liked to have taken this report very, very, very further than what it went, but for the unfortunate calling, this is where I leave you. And pretty much I'm going to say thank you, Steve Jobs, for all the things you've done for the world. These are my references. I'll leave them on for about another 5 or 10 seconds so you can see them. And that being said, my name is Eris Carter, and I'd like to thank you for looking at my alternate history. Thanks.